If you love me for my light, will you still love me when I go dark? This question is not romantic. It's structural, because what we often call love may be nothing more than recognition of function. When care is expected, softness rewarded, beauty maintained, affection is not affection. It's compliance management. Freud didn't believe men love women. He believed men seek repetition, the reconstruction of maternal approval through adult intimacy. The woman isn't a partner. She's a reenactment. He wrote, "A man who has been his mother's undisputed darling retains throughout life the triumphant feeling, the confidence and success." In other words, he's not loving her. He's loving the echo of the first woman who made him feel like a god. And what of the woman herself? The one behind the echo? Bell Hooks called this out with surgical precision. Love and abuse cannot coexist. Patriarchy has no interest in teaching boys how to love. So here we stand, at the fork between desire and dependency, between being and role, between connection and control. What if most relationships are simply stage plays, with scripts inherited, rehearsed, rewarded? And when one character forgets her line, love vanishes, applause fades. So ask yourself, if you stopped smiling, serving, softening, would they stay? Or was your worth the costume you wore? Welcome to the Thinking War. And today, we don't ask if men love women. We ask, do they love the woman, or just the illusion she sustains? Let's begin with a violence so subtle. We mistake it for love. Imagine a bond where affection is only offered when expectations are met, where silence punishes deviation, and praise is the currency of obedience. Not intimacy. Transaction. This is not partnership. It is performance. Modern relationships, regardless of orientation, still operate on ancient contracts. Contracts where love is tied to function. Be useful. Be beautiful. Be soft. Be less. Strip that away, and what remains? Are you still worthy of love when you no longer deliver? We rarely love people. We love roles. And in many cases, we fall not for the individual, but for the psychological convenience they provide. That is why so many fall apart not when betrayed, but when they are no longer needed. Freud warned us about this. The love object is often a narcissistic extension, not a separate subject. He called it a restoration of the ego ideal. And Bell Hooks brought it to the cultural frontline. When we love someone, we see them as they are, not as they perform for us. This war is not only about gender. It's about humanity, because when you measure someone's worth by what they do for you, you've already denied them the right to simply be. This is the split between being and doing, between self and script, between love as liberation or love as leverage. If you've ever felt that being yourself was never enough, this isn't your story alone. Freud didn't study love as romance. He studied it as ritual, as pathology, as the psyche's desperate effort to repeat what was once lost, in order to control it. This is the essence of repetition compulsion, to seek again and again the same emotional structure, not because it satisfies, but because it's familiar. Freud once wrote, "We are what we are because we have been what we have been." Desire, then, is not a choice. It's a reenactment, a quiet return to the scene of the original wound. The woman becomes a container, a vessel for unresolved maternal longing. She is not loved as herself, but as an echo of a remembered warmth, or worse, an imagined repair. The mother archetype becomes the blueprint for intimacy. And if she was cold, then coldness becomes attractive. If she was inconsistent, then inconsistency becomes erotic. This isn't love. It's architecture, and every partner is a new tenant in an old design. Freud would argue, most men don't fall for the woman in front of them. They fall for the structure she unconsciously agrees to maintain. Her role is not romantic. It's psychoanalytic scaffolding. So when she stops playing that role, when she asserts subjectivity, stillness, resistance, she becomes disruptive. The fantasy collapses. So Freud's position is clear. Desire is not liberation. It is the mind's attempt to possess the past, through the body of someone present. Bell Hooks didn't ask, what is love? She asked, who gets to be loved, and who is merely used to maintain the illusion of it? In her world, love is not a given. It is a political act, a structure shaped by patriarchy, enforced by culture, and performed under surveillance. Hooks wrote, the men who fear being vulnerable fear love. They want to receive the care without the accountability. And so, what we call relationship becomes a system where the emotional labor is unequal. But the narrative is romantic. The woman gives. The man receives. She bends, emotionally, physically, spiritually, to meet the needs of someone who calls it devotion. But devotion without reciprocity is not love. It's servitude with better lighting. Hooks challenges the very foundation. If you are only cherished when you're performing, then your worth is not in your being, but in your compliance. She reframes this as emotional colonialism. The extraction of care, softness, patience, beauty. Without consent, without rest, without return. To love, she insisted, is to see, not to use. And in that single line, she dismantled centuries of romantic propaganda. Because if the only time you feel loved is when you're useful, then you are not being loved. You are being managed. Have you ever been told you were too much the moment you asked for more than usefulness? This isn't just your story, it's the system's design. And today, Hooks brings us the reminder. Love is not what you give under pressure. It's what survives when you finally stop performing. At first glance, Freud and Hooks couldn't be further apart. One excavates the unconscious. The other dismantles cultural mythologies. But both converge on a single terrifying insight. Love, as we know it, is often a lie we tell ourselves to avoid looking at who we really are. Freud believes that romantic attraction is a return, not to the person, but to the original wound. Desire is not liberation. It's repetition. We are drawn to those who reconstruct our psychic dependency, because that dependency is the only love we've ever known. Hooks, on the other hand, names the power imbalance. Love, she says, cannot coexist with domination. If affection is earned through usefulness, then it is not intimacy. It is performance under threat. Freud says, we are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love. Hooks replies, love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's growth. If there is no justice, there is no love. So who is right? Freud identifies the mechanism. We fall for the one who mirrors the first person that shaped us, often in pain. Hooks identifies the ideology. We fall for a system that teaches us to confuse service with value, and then calls it love. In Freud, the woman becomes a stage set for male memory. In Hooks, she becomes a factory of unreciprocated emotional labor. In both cases, she is not seen. She is used. So we must ask, when you say you love someone, do you love their reality, or their symbolic utility? Have you ever loved someone only to realize you loved who they were to you, not who they were? Comment if the mask ever fell and the love disappeared. In the age of self-branding, has love become a performance metric? We curate. We seduce. We show up. Emotionally available, perfectly worded, beautifully lit. But when do we just exist? We live in a time where love is filtered through algorithms, where affection is traded like currency, where being low maintenance is praised, and needing depth is punished. Modern dating doesn't ask, who are you? It asks, how much emotional labor can I extract before you ask for something in return? What was once called affection now often resembles what Bell Hooks warned us about, emotional servitude dressed in intimacy's clothing. Freud would observe that we now mass-produce our projections. We swipe until we find someone who matches the wound pattern, and then call that chemistry. TikTok teaches men how to be high value. Instagram teaches women how to feminine energy themselves into being chosen. YouTube coaches us on how to become irresistible, not by being human, but by being desirable. We've moved from connection to compatibility, from being to branding. So when a person burns out, when they stop performing, when the mask slips, they're ghosted. Not because they failed, but because they stopped being profitable. And yet we still call this love. Have you ever felt punished for needing too much, or just being too real? Let's end where it always begins. With a person, tired, hollowed out from being everything to someone, except themselves. You gave. You adjusted. You became the ideal. Not out of love, but out of survival. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that to be loved meant to be useful. That value is earned through exhaustion. That affection comes after performance. And now, when someone says, I love you, you ask, which version of me do you love? The servant? The savior? The silence? But what if one day, you stopped performing, stopped pleasing, stopped distorting your soul just to keep a seat at someone else's table? Would they love what remains? This is the war most never name. The war between self and approval, between truth and function, between being seen and being used. Freud would say, you've mistaken trauma for destiny. You chase the past in the arms of the present. Hooks would say, you were trained to serve, not to be known. And I say, love me, or leave the illusion.